A black woman walked into a train station just to pick up her niece. Minutes later, she was branded a thief in front of hundreds of strangers. Humiliated, searched, filmed, her dignity stripped away, until one shocking moment. Her badge flashed in the light, revealing she was a police captain. That single twist unraveled a web of racial profiling and corruption, sparking a fight for justice that would shake the entire city. Naomi Brooks shifted the weight of her small rolling suitcase as she stepped through the grand entrance of Union Central Station. The air inside was warm with the press of bodies, and the echo of hurried footsteps mingled with the shrill announcements from the loudspeakers above. It was the kind of Saturday morning that should have been uneventful, the kind where a person could simply fade into the crowd, buy a ticket, and wait for the train. That was all Naomi had planned. Her niece was coming in from college, and Naomi wanted to surprise her with a proper welcome, maybe take her out for lunch before heading home. She paused beneath the massive glass ceiling where sunlight spilled through, streaking the marble floor with golden stripes. She smiled faintly, remembering how, as a child, she used to stand in places like this, gazing upward, marveling at the size of the world. Now, in her early 40s, the wonder was still there, though it was layered under years of discipline, duty, and the hard edges of a life spent in uniform. Her outfit was simple: dark jeans, a soft cream sweater, and a brown leather jacket that had grown comfortable over the years. The small suitcase rolled quietly behind her, and tucked under her arm was a worn paperback she'd been reading for weeks. To anyone else, she should have looked like just another traveler passing through. But Naomi was used to noticing eyes. She had been trained to notice them, to feel the weight of a stare even when her back was turned. She caught it almost immediately. A pair of uniformed officers, leaning near a kiosk, their conversation stuttering when she walked by. Their glances followed the suitcase, the jacket, and then her face. One of them, tall and broad across the shoulders, touched the radio on his vest. It was subtle, but she had been in law enforcement too long not to recognize the gesture. She pressed her lips together and kept walking, her boots clicking steadily across the floor. Inside, she told herself not to let it ruin the morning. She'd dealt with moments like this before, too many, in fact. There was no law against carrying herself with quiet dignity, no regulation against walking with her head high. Still, a whisper of heat rose under her skin, a flicker of anger she tried to bury. Today was supposed to be about family, about seeing her niece's smile when she spotted her aunt waiting on the platform. She stopped by a cafe near the concourse, ordering a small black coffee. The barista, a young woman with tired eyes, barely looked at her, which was a relief. Naomi took her cup and moved toward the benches, watching the stream of travelers. Businessmen in pressed suits hurried by with briefcases, teenagers with earbuds laughed too loudly, families juggled strollers and bags, and the great machine of the station pulsed on. As she sat, she let her body relax into the hard wooden bench, sipping the bitter warmth of her coffee. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to imagine nothing could intrude. Her thoughts wandered to her niece, bright-eyed, headstrong, always asking questions about the world. Naomi wanted to be there for her, to show her that even in a world full of harsh lessons, resilience mattered. But the sense of being watched would not let her go. Across the hall, one of the officers had moved closer, leaning against a pillar now, his eyes fixed on her suitcase. She pretended not to notice, lifting her book and turning a page she hadn't read yet. Her pulse was steady, but a faint coil of tension tightened in her chest. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced down at the screen. A text from her sister, reminding her to give Kayla, her niece, a hug from Mom. Naomi smiled at that, typing back quickly, "Don't worry, I've got her covered." She slipped the phone away and leaned back, deciding to wait out the minutes in silence. The announcement came over the loudspeaker: Train 47 arriving from Boston, 15 minutes late. A groan rippled through the waiting passengers, but Naomi simply nodded to herself. That gave her a little more time. She closed her eyes briefly, savoring the sounds of the station, the shuffle of shoes, the distant hiss of brakes, the low murmur of conversations blending into one another. When she opened them again, she caught sight of something that made her stomach tighten. The tall officer was speaking into his radio again, his partner now standing a few feet away, eyes flicking nervously between Naomi and the crowd. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was deliberate attention. She knew what it meant, though she tried to tell herself not to jump ahead. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she was overthinking. But 20 years in law enforcement had taught her that instinct was rarely wrong. Something was building. Naomi straightened her jacket, set the empty coffee cup down beside her, and stood. The suitcase rolled easily behind her as she started toward the far platform. She refused to shrink herself, refused to move like someone guilty of anything. Her stride was even, calm, though she could feel the air change around her as the officers shifted with her movement. At the corner of her vision, she noticed a young man sitting cross-legged on the floor, laptop balanced on his knees. His phone propped up beside him streamed video to some platform she didn't recognize. He lifted his gaze briefly, catching her eye. There was curiosity there, but also something sharper, recognition that something was happening. Naomi looked away quickly, not wanting to give more energy to her unease. She told herself she could handle it. She always had. Still, as the minutes stretched, the weight of anticipation pressed harder. What should have been a normal Saturday morning was slowly twisting into something else, something she could not yet name, but felt deep in her bones. By the time the clock above the departures board ticked past 11, the sunlight through the glass ceiling seemed harsher, the voices around her sharper. Naomi tightened her grip on the suitcase handle and breathed deeply. She was not just another woman in this crowd, though no one here knew it. She carried a history, a badge that was hidden from sight, and a strength that had been tested too many times. Today, she thought, was supposed to be simple. But the way the officer's eyes tracked her every step told her it was about to become anything but. The noise inside Union Central Station carried its own rhythm, like the heartbeat of a restless city. Naomi adjusted her suitcase handle as she moved toward the arrivals board, eyes scanning for the latest update on her niece's train. She was thinking about whether they might stop at a diner for pancakes afterward when a sharp voice cut through the noise. "Excuse me, my purse, it's gone. Somebody took it." The words came from a woman near the ticket counters, her voice pitched with practiced outrage. Heads turned almost instantly, and the crowd rippled with curious whispers. Naomi slowed her pace, instinctively glancing toward the commotion. She saw a white woman in her 50s, pearl earrings glinting under the station lights, her manicured hands clutching at the strap of her coat. She was speaking with exaggerated panic, her eyes darting across the crowd as if already searching for a suspect. It happened quickly, too quickly for coincidence. The tall officer who had been eyeing Naomi all morning suddenly straightened, his hand going to the radio clipped at his vest. "We've got a report of theft. Female suspect. Black. Brown suitcase," he said into the receiver, his voice loud enough for those nearby to hear. His partner, a slimmer man with restless eyes, fell into step beside him, gaze locking on Naomi. The woman with the pearl earrings pointed directly in her direction, her voice rising above the chatter. "That's her. I saw her take it. She slipped my wallet into that bag of hers." The words slammed against Naomi like a blow. For a moment, she stood rooted in place, unable to believe how casually the accusation had been tossed into the air. The suitcase at her side suddenly felt heavier, the coffee she'd finished earlier churning uneasily in her stomach. She drew a slow breath, the same way she had on patrol countless times when facing down volatile suspects. But this time, she was not the one with the badge in sight, not the one the crowd instinctively trusted. She was just a black woman in civilian clothes, caught in a web spun in seconds. Murmurs rose quickly, an ugly hum weaving through the hall. "That her? I knew it. Figures." A teenager lifted his phone to start recording, zooming in on Naomi as though she were part of a spectacle. A mother pulled her child closer, her eyes narrowing. The accusations floated through the air like smoke, and no amount of denial seemed likely to clear them away. Naomi's hand tightened on the suitcase handle. She kept her voice level when the officers approached, their footsteps heavy with authority. "I don't know what she thinks she saw, but I haven't touched anyone's purse. You're making a mistake." Her words were calm, controlled, but she could feel her pulse hammering under her skin. The tall officer, his name tag read Cole, stopped inches from her, his presence deliberately imposing. "Ma'am, step aside. We've got a theft complaint, and you match the description." His partner, Marks, shifted uneasily, as if he wasn't entirely convinced, but unwilling to speak up. Cole's eyes bore into hers with an arrogance that said he had already made up his mind. Naomi could feel dozens of eyes drilling into her, judging her, dissecting her body as though guilt could be found written on her skin. She lifted her chin. "A description? A black woman with a brown bag? That's not a description. That's profiling." Cole smirked, as if the word amused him. "You can explain that later. Right now, we need to check your belongings." His hand gestured toward her suitcase. The woman with the pearls stepped closer, emboldened by his support. "I saw her. She was right behind me at the ticket line. She looked nervous, kept adjusting her bag. I'm telling you, she took it." Her voice trembled, but Naomi recognized the type. Trembling not from fear, but from the satisfaction of being believed instantly, her story accepted without question. "I didn't touch your purse," Naomi said evenly, though heat was rising into her chest. She scanned the crowd, hoping anyone might step forward, might say they'd seen differently. But most people only watched with hungry curiosity, waiting to see the drama unfold. Cole's hand twitched toward her suitcase. "Then you won't mind showing us what's inside." Naomi felt her jaw tighten. The moment hung heavy between them, the accusation hanging like a noose. She thought of her niece, of the simple plan for pancakes and laughter, and realized those plans were slipping further away with every breath. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was the start of something else, something darker. And though she knew she could end it in a single instant by pulling the badge from her pocket, her pride, her dignity, told her to wait, to let them show their hand first. The station's loudspeaker crackled overhead, announcing the delayed train, but hardly anyone paid attention. The true spectacle was here now, unfolding in the open space by the ticket counters. Naomi straightened her shoulders, refusing to cower as Cole loomed over her. The accusation had been spoken, the crowd was watching, and the trap was already closing. Inside, she whispered to herself, "Stay calm. Let it play out." But the truth was, she knew the humiliation had only just begun. Naomi felt her breath catch as the tall officer's hand reached for the zipper of her suitcase. She wanted to shout, to stop him, to remind him that he had no legal ground to treat her like this. But before she could form the words, he yanked it open, dragging the suitcase onto the cold floor of the station. The sound of the zipper rasping open echoed louder than the station announcements overhead. She stood still, her arms at her sides, fighting the instinct to grab the case back. Around her, the crowd pressed closer, forming a circle of curious onlookers who smelled scandal. Phones rose into the air, tiny red lights blinking, capturing every humiliating second. Cole didn't bother to crouch. He plunged his hand inside and began pulling things out one by one. Shirts, neatly folded, tossed onto the marble floor. A pair of worn jeans landed with a slap. He pulled out her paperback, flipping through the pages as though something might be hidden between them, then let it fall carelessly into a puddle of spilled coffee nearby. Naomi's jaw tightened, her nails biting into her palms. He didn't stop there. He dragged out her framed family photo, a picture of her niece grinning wide on her high school graduation day. The glass cracked as it hit the floor, shards scattering like tiny knives. Someone in the crowd laughed. "Really, ma'am?" Cole said, his voice heavy with mockery. "Traveling light, huh? Looks like you packed for a whole vacation." His partner Mark shifted uncomfortably behind him, but said nothing. Naomi forced her voice to remain steady, though every nerve inside her screamed. "You have no right to go through my things without a warrant or probable cause." Cole straightened, his hand gripping her sweater-covered arm. "We have a complaint, and that's enough, unless you'd like to make this more difficult." His grip tightened, his thumb pressing into her skin, and the phones in the crowd zoomed in on the moment. The woman who had accused Naomi of stealing leaned forward, emboldened by Cole's words. "Check the inside pocket. That's where she put it. I saw it." Her voice was shrill now, frantic in its certainty. Naomi turned her head sharply to meet her eyes. The woman flinched for just a second, then looked away, but her words had already fed the fire. Cole crouched again, digging through the suitcase's side compartments. He pulled out Naomi's leather-bound notebook, flipping it open, letting private notes flutter to the ground like leaves. He found nothing. Still, he kept searching, pulling every item out until her belongings formed a humiliating pile on the station floor. By now, the murmurs of the crowd had grown into a low rumble. She probably hid it somewhere else. Look at her, so calm, like she's practiced this before. Of course she's guilty. A man's voice rang out, louder than the others. If she's innocent, why won't she just cooperate? Naomi turned slowly toward the voice, her chest tight, but she said nothing. She had learned long ago that sometimes silence could be more powerful than shouting. But the silence cut her differently this time. It burned. She was being stripped of her dignity in front of strangers who had already judged her. Cole slammed the suitcase shut, though most of her belongings were still scattered around. "Pick it up," he ordered. When she didn't move, he sneered. "Or do you expect someone else to clean up your mess?" Naomi drew in a long breath, bending to collect her things with deliberate care. Her fingers brushed over the broken glass of the photo frame, cutting her thumb slightly. A bead of blood welled up, and she pressed it against her sweater. Her niece's smiling face stared up from the cracked picture, a reminder of why she had come here in the first place. She blinked hard to keep tears from spilling over. She would not give them that satisfaction. Mark stepped forward awkwardly, whispering to Cole, "Maybe we should wait for backup. This doesn't feel right." Cole shot him a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "She's hiding something. You'll see." Naomi gathered the last of her belongings, stacking them clumsily back into the suitcase. The crowd hadn't thinned. If anything, more people had gathered, their phones lifted high, their voices blending into a chorus of suspicion and amusement. A teenager near the front laughed. "Hey, lady, smile for TikTok!" Her throat ached, but she forced herself to stand tall. "I have done nothing wrong," she said firmly, her voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest circle of bystanders. "And you all know it." The words rippled outward, but they did little to change the atmosphere. People were entertained, not moved. Cole stepped closer, his voice low, meant only for her ears. "You think talking like that makes you sound innocent? It just makes you look arrogant. And arrogance usually means guilt." Naomi's lips pressed together. Inside, her fury roared. She thought about revealing her badge right then, about cutting the charade short. But another voice inside whispered to wait, to let them go further, to let the truth expose itself in a way no one could deny. That choice meant enduring this humiliation a little longer, and she knew it. She felt the sting of every stare, every whisper, every phone camera capturing the moment. Mark shifted again, clearly uncomfortable, his eyes flicking between Naomi and the woman who had made the accusation. For a fleeting second, Naomi thought he might speak up, might call this what it was, a farce built on prejudice. But his lips stayed closed, his silence heavy with cowardice. Cole reached for his radio, speaking into it with practiced authority. Possible theft suspect detained at the main concourse, requesting immediate police backup. His voice carried, designed for the crowd as much as for the dispatch. Heads nodded around him. The narrative was being written in real time, and Naomi could feel it cementing against her. She swallowed hard, her pulse steadying into a rhythm she recognized from her years on the job. This was the moment between escalation and explosion, the thin edge where dignity and despair met. She lifted her chin once more, the weight of her humiliation heavy on her shoulders, but her resolve holding firm. The loudspeaker above crackled again, announcing another delay. But in the cavernous station, no one seemed to care about trains anymore. All eyes were fixed on Naomi Brooks, the black woman with a suitcase, standing alone in a circle of judgment. And though the shame burned deep, she vowed silently to herself, this would not be the end of her story. It was only the beginning. The murmur of the station had turned into a restless storm. Naomi stood in the center of it, her belongings half packed, her dignity scattered across the marble floor, just like her clothes and her niece's broken photograph. Santer Cole loomed beside her, his radio crackling on his shoulder as he called for more backup. The sound felt like a gavel hitting wood, a pronouncement that she was already guilty. She could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. This was not the first time she had felt the heat of suspicion, but the scale of it, the crowd pressing closer, cameras raised high, made her pulse quicken with anger and shame. The crowd itself was splitting, voices rising on either side of her. "She should just open the bag if she's innocent," a man shouted from near the ticket counter. "Stop resisting," another barked. A young mother clutching her daughter's hand whispered harshly, "This is why I don't trust bringing kids downtown. People like her everywhere." Naomi heard the words clearly, felt them stab sharper than Cole's grip on her arm. But there were other voices too, smaller at first, then growing louder. "She hasn't even been caught with anything," someone argued from the edge of the circle. "Y'all don't see what's happening? This is racial profiling." An older black man in a wool cap shook his head, calling out, "Leave her alone. You didn't see her take a thing." The push and pull of opinions rippled through the station, strangers confronting strangers as Naomi stood as the unwilling center of their argument. Off to her right, a young man crouched low, holding his phone steady. His eyes were focused, serious, not mocking like the teenagers earlier. Naomi recognized him. He had been sitting on the floor with a laptop not long ago. Now he had joined the circle, his voice cutting through. "I've been streaming this the whole time," he announced, his tone surprisingly firm for someone so young. "Everyone watching can see she didn't take anything. You're just harassing her." Cole snapped his head toward him. "Put that phone down. This isn't your business." The young man stood taller, defiant, though his hands trembled slightly. "Yeah, it is my business when you're humiliating someone for no reason. My name's Ethan Ramirez, and this is going out live. People are watching." He held his phone higher, his live stream catching Cole's scowl and the crowd's restless shifting. A few people cheered at his words, emboldened by his nerve. Naomi felt a flicker of gratitude, though she didn't let it show. Her training told her to keep her expression unreadable, but inside she whispered, "Thank you, kid." His presence was a reminder that not everyone in this station was blind. Meanwhile, near the ticket booths, a man in a worn jacket was waving frantically, trying to push past the security guard. "I found it," he shouted. "The wallet? It was on the floor by the vending machines. She didn't take it." He held it up, brown leather catching the light, but the guard blocked his path with a stiff arm, muttering into his earpiece. The crowd noticed, eyes widening, voices rising louder. "She didn't steal it," a woman shouted from the benches. "Let him through." The chant started small but quickly caught fire. "Let him through! Let him through!" The guard looked uneasy, his grip loosening just a little, but Cole barked an order over the noise. "Hold him back. Evidence can be planted. We'll handle it." Naomi's blood boiled at the words. Evidence planted? That was the story being written already. She could see it forming in Cole's eyes, his need to be right no matter what the truth was. He glanced at her suitcase, then at the crowd, then back at her, his jaw tightening. He wanted her to crack, to give him something, anything, that justified the spectacle he had created. Naomi straightened her back, her voice low but firm. "You know what this is, Sergeant, and so does everyone watching. You're not looking for the truth. You're looking for a win." Cole leaned closer, his breath hot against her ear. "Watch your mouth. You're one word away from resisting arrest." Naomi met his gaze, unflinching. "Then maybe you should ask yourself what you're arresting me for." The tension was unbearable, thick as smoke. The crowd surged forward another step, some shouting at Naomi to comply, others yelling at the officers to back off. A young girl, no more than 16, called out from the front row, "I'm recording too. I saw her standing there the whole time. She didn't take anything." Her voice cracked, but her courage carried weight. Several other phones lifted higher, like torches in a dark street. Marks, the younger officer, shifted again, his unease written across his face. "Sarge," he muttered, barely audible over the noise. "Maybe we should." Cole cut him off sharply. "Shut it. Stay focused." Naomi's hands tingled with the urge to end this charade, to pull out her badge and slam it into his chest. But she knew the moment wasn't right. Not yet. The humiliation wasn't complete. The trap hadn't sprung far enough to reveal its cruelty. She could feel it. Something bigger was unfolding, and she had to hold steady until it did. A chant rose from the crowd, echoing against the vaulted ceiling. "Show the proof! Show the proof!" It came from both sides now, those demanding to see her guilt and those demanding to see her innocence. The sound was deafening, vibrating in Naomi's bones. She felt like she was standing on trial, her jury composed of strangers with cell phones and quick judgments. As the shouting swelled, Cole reached again for her suitcase, intent on dragging it back open. Naomi's pulse hammered, but her voice remained steady. "Don't touch my things again. If you want to find the truth, listen to your own people. There's a wallet right over there in that man's hand." She pointed toward the man still struggling with the guard, his arm raised high with the lost item. "But you don't want the truth, do you? You want the headline." The words landed heavy, even in the noise. A few people gasped. Ethan's phone caught every syllable, his live stream viewers pouring comments into the feed. Cole froze, his face tightening, but before he could answer, the station loudspeaker cracked overhead, announcing another arrival. The sound mixed with the roar of voices, the flashing of cameras, the pounding of Naomi's own heartbeat. She stood tall amid the chaos, her dignity bruised but not broken. Her eyes locked on the officers who thought they could strip her down to nothing. The crowd was no longer just a passive audience. It had become divided, restless, dangerous in its energy. And Naomi understood with a cold clarity that this was only the beginning of the storm. The crowd swelled tighter, the noise pressing in from every side until the vaulted ceiling seemed to vibrate with shouts and murmurs. Naomi stood at the center of it, her suitcase lying half open, her belongings scattered like evidence of a crime that had never been committed. Cole's hand hovered near his cuffs, his face locked into that smug mask of authority that told everyone watching he was certain of her guilt. Marks kept shifting uneasily at his side, his eyes darting toward the man still trying to show the wallet to anyone who would listen. The air felt charged, a storm about to break, and Naomi could taste the bitterness of it at the back of her throat. She knew she could end it now, right in this moment. All it would take was one move, one reach inside her jacket pocket, one flash of the badge she carried everywhere, even off duty. She could watch Cole's arrogance crumble, could silence the whispers, could crush the accusation under the weight of her true authority. But she waited, just a heartbeat longer. Let them dig their own grave. Let the humiliation reach its peak so that when she revealed who she truly was, there would be no escape, no denial. Cole stepped closer, his voice carrying for the crowd. "Ma'am, I'm asking you one last time. Either open that bag completely right now, or I'll place you under arrest for obstruction." His hand touched the cuffs at his belt, and several people in the crowd cheered him on. "Do it. Lock her up," someone shouted from the back. Naomi heard a different voice near the front, quieter but just as sharp. "This is wrong. You all know this is wrong." Her heart hammered, but her face was steady, her tone unshaken. "You've searched my bag. You found nothing. A man right over there has the missing wallet in his hand, and yet you still circle me like vultures. Why? Because I fit a description you made up?" Her words cut through the noise, landing heavy in the silence that briefly followed. She let it hang there, the question no one wanted to answer. Cole sneered, trying to recover, his eyes flicking nervously toward the crowd's raised phones. "Ma'am, your attitude isn't helping your case." Naomi felt the heat rise in her chest, the burn of every humiliation pressing against her ribs. And then she made her choice. She lifted her voice, louder than she had spoken all day, letting it carry across the station. "You want to know who you're dealing with? Fine." Slowly, deliberately, she reached inside her jacket. The crowd hushed as if the very air had stopped moving. Cole's hand flew to his holster, his body tensing, but Naomi ignored him. She pulled her badge free, the gold glint catching the harsh station lights, and held it up for all to see. "My name is Captain Naomi Brooks," she declared, her voice like steel, Internal Affairs Division, 20 years on the force, and you are humiliating an officer of your own department in front of half this city." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the loudspeaker announcing the next arrival seemed muted against the weight of her words. For one suspended, impossible second, every eye was fixed on her, every breath held, and then the whisper started, quick and sharp, racing through the crowd. "She's a captain? She's one of them? Oh my God, did you hear that?" Cole's face drained of color, his mouth opening but no words coming. Marks blinked rapidly, as if trying to process what had just been thrown into his world. The accuser, the woman with the pearl earrings, stammered, "No, that can't be. She still stole it, I swear." Her voice cracked, her certainty collapsing under the weight of Naomi's badge gleaming in the air. Naomi stepped forward, every line of her body radiating the authority she had earned through decades of service. You violated my rights. You humiliated me in public without cause. You ignored evidence that cleared me. And you did it because I am black and you thought I would be easy prey. But you picked the wrong woman. Phones caught every word, every flicker of expression on Cole's ashen face. The man with the wallet finally broke past the guard, and rushing forward with it, raised high. Here it is! I told you, I found it by the vending machines. She didn't take it. He shoved it into the air, and the crowd erupted in shouts of outrage and vindication. Naomi pointed at the wallet, her voice cutting like a knife. There's your proof. Not in my bag, not in my hands, but on the floor where it was dropped. And yet you dragged me through hell because it was easier to blame me than to search for the truth. Cole's jaw clenched, but the tremor in his hand betrayed him. He tried to bluster, to salvage authority from the wreckage. Captain or not, you should have complied. Complied with what? Naomi snapped, her voice ringing clear. With illegal searches? With public humiliation? With being treated like a criminal for daring to exist in this station with a brown bag? No, Sergeant, I don't comply with injustice. I expose it. The roar of the crowd grew louder, a mixture of applause, cheers, and angry shouts directed at Cole and Marks. Ethan's live stream captured it all, his phone trembling slightly as he turned to catch Naomi's defiant stance, her badge lifted high. Comments flooded the screen faster than he could read, viewers demanding accountability, demanding justice. Marks finally spoke, his voice shaky. Sarge, she's telling the truth. We found nothing. The wallet's right there. We need to stop this. Cole rounded on him, eyes wild, but Marks didn't back down. His gaze flicked toward Naomi's badge, and he looked almost ashamed. We need to stop, he repeated, louder this time, as though saying it might cleanse him of his silence up until now. Naomi lowered her badge slowly, but her eyes never left Cole. She could see the panic in his expression, the scramble of a man who realized the ground beneath him was crumbling. Around them, the station had transformed into a courtroom, and Naomi had taken her rightful place not as the accused, but as the judge, the witness, and the truth. In that moment, standing amid broken glass and scattered clothes, Naomi Brooks knew she had taken back control. The tables had turned, and there was no going back. The humiliation they had tried to brand onto her now seared itself into them, burned into the memory of every phone that had captured it, every witness who would carry the story beyond these walls. And as she looked into Cole's pale face, she thought, this is just the beginning. The weight of silence that followed her revelation was unlike anything Naomi had ever felt. It wasn't the kind of silence that came from respect or awe. It was the heavy pause of shame, confusion, and disbelief spreading through the crowd. She stood steady, her badge still catching the station lights, her back straight, her voice echoing in memory across the marble floor. The phones had captured every word, and the people who only minutes ago had muttered accusations now shifted uneasily, as if caught in the act of their own complicity. The woman with the pearl earrings stammered again, her voice breaking. I know what I saw. She had it. I swear she did. Her hands trembled, her certainty crumbling. Her eyes darted between Naomi and the wallet held high by the man who had finally broken through the security guard's blockade. The crowd's attention snapped to him as he lifted the brown leather wallet higher for all to see, the same wallet that had sparked the entire spectacle. I told you I found it on the floor, he shouted, his voice rough with frustration. Over by the vending machines. She never touched it. Look, inside is everything, cards, receipts, even cash. Nothing's missing. He opened the flap with shaking hands, pulling out a driver's license to prove it. This woman. He jabbed his finger toward the accuser. She dropped it herself. Or maybe she didn't even realize she left it behind. But this lady, he pointed to Naomi, she didn't take a damn thing. The crowd rippled with murmurs, many turning their gaze on the accuser now, whispers rising like smoke. So she lied? She just pointed her out. What the hell was that about? The woman's face flushed red, her pearls trembling against her neck as she tried to defend herself. I thought I saw. Maybe it was confusion. I just know she looked suspicious. Her excuses only made the murmurs sharper. Naomi's eyes fixed on her, calm but piercing. Suspicious, she repeated, her voice heavy with quiet anger. Suspicious because I was black. Suspicious because I had a suitcase. Suspicious because it was easier to believe I was guilty than to believe you lost track of your own wallet. Her words sliced through the air, and the crowd fell into another uneasy hush. Cole shifted beside her, his confidence cracking. He tried to regain control, his voice raised in a tone meant to command. All right, that's enough. The situation's being handled. Everyone needs to clear out. But the people didn't move. Instead, voices rose louder, a tide pushing back against him. She didn't do anything. You humiliated her. We all saw it. Phones stayed raised, their cameras capturing his every flinch. For the first time, Naomi saw the faint glimmer of fear in his eyes. He had lost control of the narrative, and he knew it. Ethan Ramirez stepped forward, his phone still streaming. His voice carried, bold and sure. Everyone online just saw the truth too. Thousands of people are watching right now, Sergeant. Thousands. They saw you tear through her bag. They saw you ignore the evidence. And now they're watching you try to cover it up. He turned his camera deliberately to Cole, zooming close on the sweat gathering at the man's temples. Marks, standing stiffly at Cole's side, finally spoke, his voice quieter but carrying weight. Sarge, he's right. We've got nothing on her. The wallet's been found. This should be over. His words didn't sound like defiance so much as resignation, but in the charged air they rang out like a verdict. Naomi stepped closer to Cole, her voice controlled but edged with steel. You could have stopped this at any point. You could have listened when I told you I hadn't taken anything. You could have listened when that man tried to show you the wallet. But you didn't. You doubled down. You dragged me through the mud in front of everyone here. And now the truth is plain for all to see. Cole's jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. He muttered something under his breath, but the crowd had already turned against him. Voices grew louder, accusations flying now not at Naomi but at him. Apologize. You targeted her. She's a captain, and you tried to humiliate her. The chants built, layer by layer, until the station reverberated with anger, not aimed at Naomi, but at the men who had treated her like a criminal. Naomi bent down quietly, gathering her belongings once more. This time she did it with deliberate calm, folding her clothes back into the suitcase, wiping the cracked glass of her niece's photo with her sleeve, placing the picture carefully at the bottom where it wouldn't cut her again. Her movements, steady and unhurried, felt like a silent reclamation of dignity. She could feel the eyes on her, but now they were different, not condemning, but searching, ashamed, even protective. When she stood again, the badge still gleaming in her hand, she turned back to the crowd. This isn't just about me, she said, her voice resonating through the vast space. It's about how easily any one of you could have been in my place, how quickly an accusation can become humiliation, how fast a false story can take root when no one questions it. Remember what you saw today. Remember how quickly you judged. The accuser shrank back, her pearl necklace trembling as she whispered protests no one cared to hear. Cole looked at her, his face twisted in barely controlled rage, but there was nothing he could do now. Marks wouldn't back him. The crowd wouldn't back him. And the evidence, the truth, was undeniable. Naomi turned to Ethan, nodding once. Keep that footage safe. He nodded back, determination flashing in his young eyes. Already uploaded to the cloud. They can't erase it now. Naomi pulled her suitcase upright, its wheels rattling against the marble floor. She held her badge one last time in the air, so every camera could capture it, so there would be no doubt, no confusion about who she was. Then she tucked it back into her jacket. She wasn't leaving in shame. She was leaving in control. As she walked toward the platform where her niece's train would soon arrive, the crowd parted, people stepping aside respectfully, some even murmuring apologies as she passed. A few clapped softly, hesitant but heartfelt. Others lowered their phones, as if embarrassed to have been part of the mob that had turned on her so quickly. Behind her, Cole's voice rang out, desperate and hollow. This isn't over, Captain Brooks. But his words fell flat, drowned in the murmurs of a crowd that had already made up its mind. Naomi didn't turn back. She had no need to. Every step forward felt heavier and lighter at the same time, heavy with the weight of what she had endured, lighter with the knowledge that the truth had finally forced its way into the open. She had faced humiliation, stood through the storm, and turned it back on those who had tried to break her. The truth was out now, undeniable, caught on 1,000 cameras, whispered on 1,000 lips. And deep inside, Naomi knew this was far from the end. It was only the first crack in a wall that had been standing far too long. Naomi had thought that lifting her badge would be the end of it. She believed, for a moment, that the spectacle would collapse under the weight of truth, that Cole and his smug certainty would shrivel in the face of reality, and that the crowd would finally turn its eyes elsewhere. But truth, she reminded herself bitterly, rarely ended things as cleanly as it should. The station had grown restless again, not with the same cruel suspicion as before, but with the hunger of people realizing there was more to the story than what they had just seen. They weren't satisfied. They wanted answers. Cole stood stiff as stone, his lips thin, his fists curling at his sides. He muttered something Naomi couldn't catch and reached for his radio again. The crowd was quieter now, phones still raised, ears straining to catch every sound. The static crackled, and then it came, a voice, low and clipped, not realizing how far it carried through the speaker. Black female, brown bag, priority stop. Don't let her out of sight. Make sure it sticks. The words buzzed over the frequency like a curse. Gasps rippled through the people standing closest. Naomi's head snapped toward the device, her stomach tightening with the recognition of what she had just heard. They'd been given orders before the accusation had even been made. It hadn't been the panic of a woman losing her wallet. It had been scripted, orchestrated. She could feel the crowd shift again, their eyes darting not just between her and Cole, but toward the invisible presence on the other end of that radio. Who was that? Ethan's voice rose above the crowd, sharp, demanding. His phone caught every syllable, streaming the damning audio to whoever was watching live. Play it again. Everyone heard that, right? He turned the camera toward faces in the crowd, catching nods, recording witnesses in real time. Cole's hand snapped to the volume, his thumb twisting the dial to silence the evidence, but the damage had already been done. Naomi's chest rose and fell with a deliberate calm, though inside her anger burned hot enough to sear through her skin. That wasn't dispatch protocol, she said, her voice loud enough to cut through the chatter. That was someone giving you a directive, someone telling you to make me a target. Cole tried to cover it with a laugh, though it came out jagged. You're imagining things. Could have been any code, any transmission. Naomi stepped closer, her face inches from his, her eyes locked on his pale, twitching expression. I know the codes, Sergeant. Better than you. And that wasn't one of them. That was an order, and you followed it like a dog. The crowd murmured again, this time with anger not at her, but at him. The tide had shifted once more, and Naomi could feel its pull. From somewhere behind the mass of onlookers, a young girl's voice cut through, trembling but clear. I recorded it too. I got the whole thing. Naomi turned, spotting a teenager clutching her phone, her face nervous but determined. She raised the device like a trophy. He didn't know his radio was on when it came through. Everyone online's already clipping it. Cole swore under his breath, his composure crumbling, but before he could snatch the radio away or try to spin it further, Marks finally broke his silence. She's right, he said, his voice rough, resigned. His words came haltingly, but once they started, he couldn't stop. We were told to watch her before anything happened. I didn't like it, but it came from higher up. Not just me, not just him. The world seemed to stop. Naomi stared at him, her breath catching in her throat. The admission wasn't loud, but the microphones of half a dozen phones caught every word. Ethan swung his camera toward Marks, his expression wild with disbelief and vindication. Say that again, Ethan demanded. Say it louder. Marks shifted under the weight of 100 eyes, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked at Naomi, shame flickering in his eyes, then at Cole, who was vibrating with fury. Finally, he straightened his shoulders. We were told to make sure she didn't walk out clean, that she looked guilty no matter what. It wasn't just us. It's a directive. It happens every weekend. The explosion from the crowd was instant. Shouts, curses, voices rising like a wave crashing against rock. Some people cried out in rage, others in disbelief, but all of it thundered through the station with a force Naomi could feel in her bones. Phones zoomed in on Marks, capturing the tremor in his jaw, the broken cadence of a man cracking under pressure. Cole lunged at him, his hand shoving against his chest, spitting words Naomi couldn't catch, but it was too late. Naomi raised her voice, sharp and cutting, pulling all the chaos back into her control. So there it is. Not a mistake. Not an accident. A system. Orders to target people who look like me, to humiliate them, to feed lies into reports so it sticks. She turned in a slow circle, her eyes sweeping the crowd. And you all saw how quickly you believed it, how fast you condemned me before a shred of proof existed. Her words landed with the force of truth, undeniable, painful. She could see it in their eyes. The shame, the dawning realization, the quiet acknowledgement that they had been willing participants until the evidence slapped them awake. She didn't need to scold them. The weight of their own conscience was doing it for her. Ethan moved closer, his phone raised high, his voice fierce. This isn't going away. Everyone online just heard what you heard. It's proof, not just profiling, orders, systematic orders. This isn't one cop screwing up. This is bigger. His words echoed Naomi's thoughts exactly, and she felt a strange surge of pride for the young stranger. He had courage, the kind she remembered in herself when she was his age, before the years of watching corruption grind down her hope. Cole barked again into his radio, desperate now, but the crowd drowned him out. Naomi kept her gaze on Marks, who couldn't meet her eyes. She didn't hate him, not entirely. He looked like a man who had carried a weight too heavy, who had finally dropped it in public for everyone to see. His confession was a crack in the wall, and Naomi knew cracks had a way of spreading until the whole structure collapsed. The station was alive with noise, phones buzzing, people shouting, the accuser shrinking against a pillar like she wanted to vanish. Naomi felt her niece's cracked photograph pressing against her side in the suitcase, a reminder of why she had come here in the first place. But now, she understood this day had never been about a train ride or a family lunch. It had been about exposing what had been festering all along. As the crowd surged with outrage, Naomi lifted her badge once more, holding it high above her head. Her voice rose above the storm. I am Captain Naomi Brooks, and what you just witnessed is proof that this is bigger than me. This is systemic, and I will not let it stay hidden. The roar that followed shook the glass ceiling above, echoing like thunder across the station. And though Naomi stood alone in the center, she felt, for the first time that day, that the weight pressing on her shoulders was no longer hers alone to carry. The crowd's noise still rattled through the cavernous station, echoing in Naomi's ears long after her words had fallen silent. She stood tall, her badge catching the harsh light from the glass ceiling above, her suitcase heavy at her side, her clothes still scattered here and there on the floor. It was a picture she knew would stay in people's minds. A black woman, a police captain, standing defiant in the wreckage of humiliation. She wanted to believe that would be enough, that the crack in the facade was already too wide to patch. But then she saw Officer Marks again, shifting nervously, his eyes darting between Cole, the restless crowd, and her. He looked like a man carrying a secret that had been clawing at him for too long. Naomi had learned to read people during interrogations, during interviews, during those long hours in windowless rooms where truth was something you had to coax out carefully. Marks's face was a study in conflict, fear etched along his jaw, guilt shadowing his eyes, and something like relief just beneath the surface, as if the weight he carried was begging to be dropped. She took a step closer, lowering her voice. You know this isn't the first time, is it? Not for me, not for others. You've seen it. You've been part of it. Cole spun on her instantly, his voice sharp. Don't talk to my partner. But Naomi didn't back down. She kept her eyes on Marks, her tone steady, inviting but unyielding. You don't have to protect him anymore. You don't have to protect any of them. You saw what just happened. You heard the voice on the radio. You know this is bigger than one bad decision. Tell the truth, not for me, but for yourself. Mark swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. The crowd had noticed him now, too. Phones tilted his way, lenses zooming in, the whispers swelling like a tide. He shifted on his feet, looked at Cole, then at Naomi again. His lips trembled before the words came, broken but undeniable. She's right. The station hushed so quickly that Naomi could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. All eyes turned to Marks as he took a shaky breath. This isn't the first time. We've been told. His voice cracked and he tried again, louder this time, though his tone carried the raw edge of fear. We've been told to target minorities every weekend, people of color, especially if they're carrying bags, shopping, waiting for trains. We're ordered to make them look suspicious, to make it stick. Cole's face drained of color, his rage boiling up immediately. Shut your damn mouth, Marks. You don't know what you're saying. He grabbed at the younger officer's arm, but Marks yanked it away, his voice firmer now, carrying over the crowd. No, Sarge, I do. We get the briefings every Friday. You said it yourself. It's part of the quota. Keep the numbers high. Keep the bosses happy. Didn't matter if they were innocent. Didn't matter if we ruined their lives. The eruption from the crowd was immediate. Shouts of anger, gasps of disbelief, curses hurled into the air. Some people started chanting again, louder, angrier. Justice! Justice! Others jeered at Cole, their voices dripping with contempt. Naomi stood in the middle of it all, her chest tight, her pulse thundering in her ears. She hadn't expected the confession to come so bluntly, not here, not now. But the truth had clawed its way out, and there was no shoving it back in. Cole lunged at Marks, shoving him hard against a pillar. You're finished, he spat, his voice wild with fury. You just signed your own damn death warrant. Marks shoved back, his fear burned into defiance. Maybe, but I'm done lying. I'm done ruining lives just because you or anyone else told me to. His words trembled but carried, and Ethan's camera caught every second of it, streaming it to an audience far beyond the walls of the station. Naomi stepped between them before the scuffle could turn uglier, her palm raised, her voice slicing through the chaos. Enough. The command in her tone was instinctual, the same tone she had used to diffuse tense standoffs on the job. Both men froze, if only for a moment, the weight of her authority pressing down on them. She looked at Marks first. You're braver than you think. Hold on to that, because once this is out, you'll need it. Then she turned her gaze on Cole, her voice colder. And you, your time of hiding behind badges and quotas is ending. Cole's lips curled into a sneer, but the beads of sweat on his forehead betrayed him. He looked around at the crowd, the hundreds of eyes glaring back at him, the phones raised like a wall he couldn't climb. For the first time that day, he seemed smaller. The chant started again, rolling through the station with relentless rhythm. We saw it! We heard it! We saw it! We heard it! Naomi felt the energy swell, the anger now directed where it belonged. She stood still, absorbing it, knowing this moment would ripple outward, into homes, into newsrooms, into places where people could no longer pretend this didn't happen. Her suitcase handle dug into her palm as she gripped it tighter, the cracked photo of her niece still inside, a reminder of the simple joy she had meant to have today. But there was no going back to that. This was bigger than her, bigger than family lunches or train arrivals. This was a fight that had chosen her, and now, with Marks's confession spilling into the open, there was no stepping away. Naomi looked once more at the crowd, at Ethan's determined face behind his camera, at the teenager who had captured the damning radio call, at the strangers who had shifted from spectators to witnesses. She let her voice carry one more time. You heard him. This isn't a mistake. It's a system. And systems don't crumble unless we stand against them. Today is just the beginning. The roar of agreement that followed shook the glass above and reverberated in Naomi's bones. And though she felt the exhaustion pressing at her, a bone-deep weariness from the weight of it all, she also felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, not for herself, but for what could come from this moment if people refused to let it fade into silence. As she stood in the center of the storm, Naomi knew she had just witnessed something powerful. A confession had broken through the walls of fear, and once spoken, the truth could not be buried again. When Naomi finally stepped away from the center of the concourse, the station still throbbed with the echo of chants. Her suitcase rattled softly behind her, a pitiful counterpoint to the roar she had left behind. Every step carried the weight of exhaustion, but the energy of the crowd lingered in her chest. She had faced humiliation, exposed the truth, and now she was walking toward the arrival platform where her niece's train would be coming in. yet she knew nothing would ever return to normal. Ethan caught up to her, still holding his phone out like a shield, his voice half shouting to be heard over the noise. It's already everywhere, Captain. Twitter, TikTok, Facebook. People are reposting the stream faster than I can keep up. You don't understand. It's viral. His face was flushed, lit by the glow of the screen as comments flew past faster than his eyes could catch. Look at this. 40,000 views in the first 15 minutes. People are calling you a hero. Naomi shook her head, her lips pressed in a tight line. I'm not a hero. I was a target. Don't mistake the two. Ethan blinked, but he didn't lower the phone. Maybe, but people out there, they've been waiting for proof like this, not just another story. They saw it live. They heard the confession. It can't be buried now. As they walked, Naomi felt the shift in the atmosphere of the station. Strangers who had once watched her with suspicion now moved out of her way, some offering murmured apologies, others simply avoiding her gaze. A few reached out to touch her arm in quiet solidarity. We're with you, one man whispered, his voice shaking. She nodded but didn't stop. By the time they reached the quieter platform, Naomi's phone buzzed so violently in her pocket it felt like it might rattle itself apart. She pulled it free and saw the endless stream of notifications, messages from colleagues, calls from numbers she didn't recognize, alerts from news outlets already running with the story. She scrolled quickly, her jaw tightening at the headlines. Black woman harassed at train station turns out to be police captain. Internal affairs officer humiliated by own colleagues. Systemic racism exposed in live stream viewed by thousands. She lowered the phone with a sigh, pressing her thumb and forefinger against her eyes. She hadn't wanted this spotlight. She had wanted to meet her niece, share pancakes, talk about school. But now the world had made her into a symbol. Ethan leaned against the wall, his phone still buzzing with energy. Look at the comments, he urged. Naomi resisted, but he held it out. The feed scrolled endlessly. This is what black folks deal with every damn day. Finally, someone caught them on camera. Justice for Captain Brooks. Others were cruel, laced with venom Naomi had known would come. She pulled the race card. Fake badge. She staged the whole thing. Naomi gave the phone back, her stomach churning. It cuts both ways. Don't ever forget that. For every person who stands up, there's another trying to tear them down. Ethan frowned, tucking his phone back against his chest like it was something sacred. But you can't deny the tide's turning. People are angry. For you, not at you. They want change. Before Naomi could respond, a woman in a neat blazer approached, her press badge swinging. Her hair was swept back, her eyes sharp with determination. Captain Brooks? She asked. Lena Moore, City Herald. I've been following the live stream since it started. I need a statement from you before this spins out of control. Naomi let out a bitter laugh. It's already out of control. Lena's pen hovered over her notepad. Then give me your words, not theirs. What do you want people to know? For a long moment, Naomi said nothing. She looked at the polished tile under her boots, at the suitcase standing like a silent witness beside her, at Ethan watching with wide eyes. Finally, she lifted her head. Tell them I didn't come here to make a point. I came to pick up my niece. But if this is what it takes to show people how deep this rot runs, then let them know I won't be silent. Not now. Not ever again. Lena scribbled furiously, her recorder catching every syllable. And the system? The orders your colleague confessed to? Naomi's jaw clenched. That's not new. That's not shocking. The only shocking thing is that someone finally said it out loud where the world could hear. You can print that. Lena gave her a long look, the kind that carried both sympathy and the thrill of a story breaking wide. Then she slipped back into the crowd, already dialing her editor. Naomi sank onto a bench, her body heavy, the adrenaline beginning to drain. Ethan sat beside her, awkward but loyal, like a kid unwilling to let go of something larger than himself. You know this is just the start, right? He said quietly. They're not going to let this go. Neither side will. You'll have support, but you'll have enemies too. Maybe more than you realize. She turned her head, studying him. His youth was written in his face in the earnest way he believed the truth would be enough. She wanted to protect him from the darker parts of what she knew, from the retaliation that always came when you poked too deep into power. But she couldn't. Not anymore. I've had enemies before, she said softly, but this time I think they're scared. The arrival board flashed above them. Train 47, arriving. Naomi's chest tightened, not with fear, but with something else, a reminder of why she had walked into this storm in the first place. Soon she would see her niece Kayla, bright and hopeful, stepping off that train with no idea of the fire her aunt had just walked through. Naomi straightened, gripping the handle of her battered suitcase. The noise of the crowd behind them still hummed like thunder, but Naomi kept her eyes forward, fixed on the platform. She didn't know what the days ahead would bring, investigations, threats, maybe even suspension. But for now, she would stand tall. She had faced humiliation and walked through it with her head high. The truth had slipped free, and the storm online was only the beginning. When the train pulled in and the brakes screeched against the tracks, Naomi rose to her feet. She was tired, bruised, raw, but she was not broken. Not today. And as the doors slid open, the world outside the station was already changing, whether it wanted to or not. By the time Naomi finally made it home that evening, the roar of the station had faded into a dull ringing in her ears. She had seen her niece, hugged her tighter than she had in months, walked her through the front door with an unconvincing smile, and pretended that everything was fine. Kayla's questions had been endless, about the crowd, about the chanting, about the phone notifications that lit up her aunt's face like fireworks. Naomi had dodged most of them, promising answers later. Once Kayla was asleep, the house fell into that quiet hum Naomi usually loved. Tonight, the silence felt too sharp, like the world was holding its breath. She brewed a pot of coffee, though she didn't need the caffeine. Adrenaline still churned through her veins. Sitting at the kitchen table, she scrolled through the chaos online. Headlines screamed from every direction. Her name, her face, was everywhere. Video clips of her humiliation at the station, her declaration of who she was, and Marx's trembling confession had spread faster than anything she'd ever seen. Her email was flooded, her phone buzzing relentlessly. Supporters called her a hero. Critics called her a liar. Death threats mixed with prayers in the same inbox. She read them until the words blurred, then shut the laptop with a sharp click. The knock at her door came close to midnight. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. Naomi's instincts lit up like a warning flare. She slid her hand over the pistol she had laid on the counter, moving quietly to the window. Outside, the street was still. A lone car idled across the way, headlights off, the outline of two figures barely visible inside. The knock came again, harder this time. She flipped the porch light on and opened the door just a crack. An envelope lay on the step, no one standing there now. Her eyes swept the shadows, but whoever left it had already retreated. She bent down, gun still in hand, and picked it up. Inside, she found a single sheet of paper, its words cut out from magazines and glued in jagged lines. "Back off, Captain. Next time, it won't just be you." Her stomach knotted, but she felt no surprise. This was the playbook. When intimidation failed in public, it always slithered back into the dark. She placed the note flat on the table, her hand steady even as her chest burned with anger. She thought of every time she had comforted families who'd received similar threats, telling them the system would protect them, that the department would investigate. Now she knew better. Now she was the one holding the proof that protection was a lie. Naomi went to her bedroom and pulled a fireproof box from the closet. Inside, she had already begun storing evidence, printouts of online clips, screen captures of the live stream, copies of the confession. She slipped the new note inside, cataloging it like she had with everything else. She had learned long ago that paper trails saved lives. If someone came after her, she wanted the world to see exactly who had tried to silence her. But the night wasn't finished with her. At 2 a.m., a crash outside jolted her awake. She grabbed her weapon and raced to the front window. The sight made her blood run cold. Across the hood of her car, sprayed in dripping red paint, was a single word: traitor. The letters bled down the white finish, ugly and raw, still wet. Her pulse thundered as she scanned the street. No shadows lingered now, no footsteps running. Whoever had done it was already gone. But when she stepped outside, the smell of fresh paint burned her nose, and in the corner of the hood, she saw something deeper than spray paint. Scratched into the metal with a key were the words, "Keep your mouth shut, Captain." Naomi stood in the cold night air, her weapon still drawn, the neon letters of warning gleaming under the porch light. Her mind churned, replaying the day's events, connecting them to the threats now unfolding on her doorstep. This wasn't random vandalism. This was personal. This was inside knowledge. Only someone within the department would know her rank, know the timing, know the kind of message that would cut deepest. Her thoughts flickered back to the uneasy glances at the station, the way Cole's voice had cracked when Marks confessed, the way her colleagues had stayed silent when she needed them most. Betrayal didn't have to come from strangers. It rarely did. She photographed everything, every drip of paint, every gouge in the metal, every angle she could capture. Her phone's memory filled with evidence while her chest filled with fury. She wasn't naive enough to call the precinct tonight. She knew how the report would read if she did. Possible vandalism, no suspects, no follow-up necessary. It would vanish into a drawer, buried until forgotten. Back inside, she sat heavily at the kitchen table, staring at the badge lying on the wood grain. For 2 decades, she had carried it with pride, defended it against every accusation, convinced herself the rot inside the department could be fought from within. Tonight it felt heavier than ever, like a relic from a faith she no longer believed in. Her eyes burned, tears threatening, but she blinked them back. There was no room for weakness now. She whispered to the empty kitchen, her voice low but certain, "You picked the wrong woman to scare." She closed her fist around the badge, feeling its edges dig into her palm. "I don't scare easy." Her phone buzzed again, lighting up the dark. This time it wasn't another news alert or angry message. It was Ethan. A simple text. "You okay?" She stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "They came to my house. Keep the footage safe. Don't trust anyone." She locked the doors, double-checked the windows, then sat in the living room with the pistol within reach, the red letters still seared in her mind. The threats had found their way from public humiliation into private terror, and Naomi knew this was only the beginning. But she also knew something else with unshakable certainty. If they were this desperate, it meant they were afraid. And fear was a weapon she could use. As the night stretched into dawn, Naomi sat in the dim glow of her living room lamp, the weight of betrayal pressing on her chest, the shadows of enemies lurking just outside her door. Her badge lay on the table, gleaming accusingly, a reminder of the fight she had chosen. The silence was thick, broken only by her own steady breathing, until she finally whispered again, almost like a vow. "This isn't just about me anymore. This is war." The morning sun crept across Naomi's living room floor, casting long, accusing lines over the badge still lying on her table. She hadn't slept, not after the vandalism, not after the threatening note. Her mind had been caught between anger and strategy, playing the same thought over and over. If they were willing to come after her in the dead of night, then they were terrified of what she had already set in motion. That knowledge hardened into something sharp in her chest, a weapon she knew she'd need to wield carefully. By noon, her phone had become unbearable. Reporters, activists, even strangers who had gotten her number somehow, all demanding comment. And then came the message from Lena Moore, the reporter she had spoken to at the station. Community protests gathering at City Square. They're asking for you to speak. They're chanting your name already. Naomi stared at the text for a long moment, the weight of it settling in her stomach. She had never wanted to be a symbol, but life had a way of making choices for you. She dressed in her uniform that afternoon, the one she hadn't worn since being promoted to captain. She pressed the creases sharp, polished her shoes until they reflected her face. Her hands trembled only once when she pinned the badge over her heart. For 20 years it had meant service and sacrifice. Today, it meant battle. When she arrived downtown, the sound hit her first. Hundreds of voices rising together, chants bouncing off the buildings that surrounded the square. "Justice for Brooks! Justice for Brooks!" Signs bobbed above the crowd, homemade but powerful. "Stop racial profiling. End the quotas." We believe her. The energy was electric, not wild but purposeful, like a storm focused into a single strike. Naomi stepped out of her car and was immediately swallowed by the sound, the sight of strangers who had turned into allies. Ethan was there, phone in hand, live streaming again, his eyes alight with the same nervous fire she had seen at the station. He ran to her, holding the camera steady. "Captain, they've been waiting for you. You have to say something. They need to hear it from you." His voice cracked slightly, but the conviction in it steadied her. Lena met her at the steps of the makeshift stage, her notepad tucked into her blazer. "This is bigger than a story now," she whispered. "They're looking to you as proof. Whatever you say, it's going to set the tone for what happens next." Naomi nodded, her throat dry. She walked up the steps slowly, the chant softening into an expectant murmur. When she reached the microphone, the sight nearly stole her breath. A sea of faces, black, white, young, old, all turned toward her with hope burning in their eyes. She had faced down armed suspects and crooked cops, but this scared her more, because the truth wasn't a bullet you could dodge or a fight you could win with fists. It was a burden, heavy and unrelenting. She cleared her throat, her voice steady when it came. 2 days ago, I went to Union Central Station to pick up my niece. I walked in with nothing but a suitcase, and because of the color of my skin, I was accused of theft. I was humiliated. I was treated as though my life, my dignity, meant nothing. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, angry and sympathetic. Naomi let the silence stretch before she continued. What they didn't know was that I am a police captain. 20 years on the force. I have given my life to protecting this city, to upholding the law, and still, none of that mattered. They targeted me anyway because it was never about guilt or innocence. It was about control, about numbers, about making someone look guilty so they could meet a quota. Her voice grew louder, stronger, carried by the weight of her fury. And when that system doesn't care about the truth, it doesn't just harm me, it harms every single person who passes through those doors, every family, every child, every neighbor who could be next. The crowd erupted, applause mixing with shouts of agreement. Naomi gripped the edges of the podium, leaning forward. Yesterday, one of those officers confessed. He admitted what many of us have known for years. This is not a mistake. This is not one bad cop. This is a system designed to target people of color, to fill reports with false arrests, to feed lives into a machine that profits off of pain. And we will not stay silent any longer. Voices roared in response, chants rising again, angrier, louder, pulsing like thunder. Naomi let it wash over her, then raised her hand, bringing the square back to stillness. I am not standing here as a victim. I am standing here as a witness. I am standing here as proof that even a captain with a spotless record and a badge of her own is not safe from the rot inside our institutions. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. That is why this must end. Today. From the edge of the stage, Lena watched with wide eyes, scribbling furiously. Ethan's phone captured every word, comments scrolling across the screen in real time. Naomi took a deep breath, feeling her chest ache with the strain of holding so much pain, so much rage, and shaping it into something the crowd could carry forward. This isn't my fight alone anymore. It's yours too. If you believe in justice, if you believe in dignity, if you believe in truth, then you cannot turn away. Stand with me, stand with each other, and together we will break this system apart until it can no longer harm another soul. The cheer that followed was deafening, a wall of sound that rattled the windows of the buildings nearby. People waved signs higher, strangers embraced, tears streaked down cheeks. Naomi stepped back from the microphone, her pulse racing, her hands shaking from the enormity of it. But for the first time since the nightmare had begun, she felt something other than anger and exhaustion. She felt solidarity. As she left the stage, Ethan grabbed her arm, his eyes shining. You don't know what you just did, Captain. You lit a fire. Naomi looked back at the crowd, still chanting her name, still holding their signs like shields. She exhaled slowly, whispering to herself as much as to Ethan. Then let's hope it's a fire they can't put out. The square was still echoing in Naomi's bones when she finally stepped off the stage. The sound of the chants lingered like a second heartbeat, pulsing in her ears long after the crowd had swallowed her up. She walked slowly, the faces blurring into one another, hands reaching out to touch her shoulder, to thank her, to tell her she wasn't alone. She nodded to them, smiled when she could, but inside she felt the exhaustion pressing down like a heavy stone. The fight had taken everything she had left, and she knew it was only the beginning. By the time the sun began to sink low, streaking the sky with orange and purple, Naomi found herself standing at the edge of the square, her suitcase still in her hand, her niece clinging to her side. Kayla's eyes were wide, her face both proud and frightened. "Aunt Naomi," she whispered, "are they going to hurt you for this?" The words stabbed deep, deeper than any insult she had endured at the station. She crouched down, brushing her niece's hair back gently, looking into those bright, questioning eyes. "They already tried," Naomi said softly, "but they didn't win. And they won't, because I'm not standing alone anymore." It wasn't bravado. She could feel it in the air, the shift, the undeniable crack in the wall. News vans lined the street, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to speak, and behind them, waves of people still chanting, still holding signs. She had lit something larger than herself, and though she feared the price, she also knew she couldn't put it back into the dark. Later that night, when the square had emptied and the city had quieted to its usual restless hum, Naomi stood on the courthouse steps. Reporters lingered, their cameras clicking like crickets in the dark. Cole had been escorted inside earlier, his face pale, his arrogance gone. Marks had given a formal statement, his voice steadier now, though his eyes betrayed the terror of a man who knew what turning on the system would cost him. Naomi watched from the shadows as the wheels of justice creaked forward, slow and reluctant, but undeniably moving. One by one, familiar faces appeared to her. Lena with her pen still scribbling, Ethan with his phone trembling as he filmed even in the fading light, the young girl who had recorded the radio transmission clutching her mother's hand. They had all become part of the story, witnesses to something that could no longer be buried. Naomi felt a swell of pride for them, ordinary people who had chosen not to look away. Inside, the courtroom lights glared, and the sound of gavels echoed faintly into the street. Naomi didn't step in. She didn't need to. She had already said everything that mattered, already handed over the evidence that would tear the cover off the rot. Now it was in the hands of the public, the press, the people who would no longer accept silence. As the hour grew late, Naomi began the walk home. Her neighborhood was quiet, the kind of quiet that usually soothed her after long days. Tonight it felt different, lighter somehow, as though even the air had shifted. When she reached her porch, she stopped in her tracks. The word that had once been scrawled across her car in dripping red had been scrubbed away, and there, taped gently to her door, was a simple cardboard sign. In a child's handwriting, uneven and crooked, it read, "You are our hero." Her throat tightened. She pulled the sign down carefully, holding it against her chest as though it were made of glass. She thought of the broken picture frame still in her suitcase, the image of Kayla's smile behind cracked glass, and how easily dignity could be shattered. But tonight, she also thought of how it could be pieced back together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but stronger in the places it had broken. She unlocked the door, stepped inside, and set the cardboard sign on her kitchen table beside her badge. The two looked strange together, one heavy with authority, the other light with innocence, but both carrying a truth she could not deny. She sank into the chair, closing her eyes as the weight of the day finally settled into her bones. She whispered to herself, to the silence, to the ghosts of every person who had been humiliated before her and silenced after. "This isn't over, but tonight, we won." For the first time in days, Naomi allowed herself to smile. It wasn't wide, it wasn't carefree, but it was real. The storm had not ended, but she had walked through it. And outside her window, the city breathed with her, restless, angry, alive, but also hopeful. She leaned back in her chair, her niece's laughter drifting faintly from the other room, and for a brief, fragile moment, Naomi felt free.